Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Web3 Quick Bite podcast. This is the podcast where we jam to the latest bit in the decentralized world and chat with some of the brilliant minds in the Web3 industry. On today's show, I'm going to start by asking you a question. When you think of innovation, what comes to mind first? Or should I say, what does innovation mean to you? To me, innovation is about turning ideas into reality. It's about bridging the gap between what is and what could be. Well, today, we have a guest who exemplifies that innovative spirit. He pioneers connections between major corporations and emerging startups and cutting-edge technologies into real-world results. As founder of VentureFuel, our guest today has partnered over 100 companies with new technologies that drive real results. Think General Mills, Netflix, and more. Super cool, right? And with decades of experience in media and marketing, he knows how to bring first-to-market ideas to life. Now, through his proven framework, he bridges the gap between enterprises hungry for innovation and emerging startups with cutting-edge solutions. Today, we are going to talk to our guest on demystifying Web3 startup building and get his blueprint for businesses eager to tap into AI, forge partnerships, and ride the wave of the future. So get ready for an inside look at repeatable innovation from a true connection builder and forward-thinking leader. The opportunities for brands are immense when they combine startup agility with corporate scale. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Fred. Hi, Fred. It's so great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your intro. The line of innovation being the gap between what is and what could be is a really good way to describe it. I love that.
Thank you. And with Web3 coming up and Web3 is set to change the face of, the internet or set to change the face of the world, innovation is at its core. And so it's important that we talk about innovation today and also let people learn and understand what innovation really means, especially in Web3. But before we dive right in, we would like to know, Fred, how did you first get introduced to Web3 and what inspired you to start VentureFuel?
Yeah, so I'll start with VentureFuel, and then go. That'll lead to Web3 nicely. So I was running a different company, and we were selling to Fortune 500 clients, and the phrase "What's next" came up in every meeting. They just kept saying, "What's next? We want a new technology, a new way to connect with consumers. How can we be faster? What's our competitive advantage?" And after several large companies said that to me, I started to ask them, well, how are you finding what's next right now? And there wasn't really a good answer. And so I saw that there was a gap in the market. And at the same time, I knew several founders who were really frustrated that they could not get a meeting with these Fortune 500 companies, even though they had a solution. And so I thought there was this opportunity to create a bridge between startups that had what's next and large corporations that were hungry for what's next and had the resources and scale to really make the startups fly. So that is our core mission is helping the world's best organizations commercialize innovation through that collaboration between startups and large corporates. Web3 came on my radar the way every technology does. Our clients, the large organizations, come to us with a problem or a gap or an opportunity, something they're curious about, that a problem worth solving. And we go out and we start to look for what are the best new solutions to help them gain competitive advantage. And Web3, as it started to really emerge and solidify and have scale, became a very interesting technology to help solve some of those problems. So that's how we first started to explore Web3.
I mean, I like to ask my guests this question, how they first got into Web3, right? Because I know everyone has a story. People found themselves in Web3 by chance, some found it by curiosity. And just like you said, you had your client coming up with questions and whatnot. So everybody has like an interesting experience of how they found themselves in the Web3 space. I just like to hear people's experiences. So that is all my first question to my guests. Like, okay, I'm curious. How did you first get into Web3? then I've had diverse answers and numerous broad answers. So thanks for sharing your own story of how you got into Web3 with us. I have so I that brings me to my next question. For someone like you who has years of experience and you've worked with many large corporations to implement new technologies and innovations, what are some key strategies you recommend for corporations looking to effectively adapt things like AI, chain, and Web3?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always advise large organizations not to start with technology, not to say, hey, we want to work with AI or Web3, but rather start with a business challenge or an opportunity or something that's important to them, and then find the technology that enables them to succeed in solving that challenge. So if you're starting with a problem that's worth solving, what that means is the organization cares about that problem. They have budget for that problem. They have attention, because often it's less about money and it's more about resources of the staff. Can they dedicate time to exploring a partnership or a pilot opportunity with a startup? And only if the problem is worthwhile to them, will they stick with it. So we really start off with that either challenge or opportunity or problem. And if we have that, then we know that it's going to work. And then, of course, once you start to explore different technologies, you really want a trusted advisor helping you make sense of what's real, what can scale, what's interesting, because especially when something is new, everything looks very flashy and promising. And so it's really trying to understand where the value is for that specific organization.
Well, awesome. So I would like to ask a follow-up question. You mentioned something about challenges. So do you think there are many challenges in Web3 for corporations to solve, seeing that Web3 hasn't gained that mainstream adoption yet? Or do you advise people to come up with challenges and then create a solution for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Web3 solves a lot of challenges. Obviously, blockchain, crypto, there's so many interesting things that these technologies can do. We actually were talking with the travel industry, and there was a company called Pink Tata, which essentially created like a tokenized hotel reservation. And it was such a big problem for the hotel industry because people reserve a room and then they cancel it. And so what happens to that room, right? That's a really expensive problem for a major hotel chain. And if you can all of a sudden tokenize that, so they maintain the revenue and they can do it seamlessly, and then potentially, right, you can just check in, you can avoid the whole check-in process, and there's that history of the relationship. So that's just one of the very many examples. I think blockchain in particular, there's a lot of applications in terms of legal and contracting and back-end infrastructure. So there's a lot that's really interesting, depending on which part of Web3 you're most interested in.
Well, this is the first time I'm hearing about the hotel world. I mean, most of the Web3 startups I see, either they are more focused on the crypto aspect of it, or they are doing something that everyone is already doing in the Web3 space. And so I haven't really seen any new innovation. Maybe I'm not looking in the right places, but I really haven't seen anything out of the box, if I can put it like that. So so recently I actually met a founder who said he's trying to do something about data storage and everything. Sounded interesting. I mean, it's different from everyday startup founders you meet that they're always talking about crypto. It gets boring after a while. I mean, we were trying to solve challenges, but trying to get Web3 to have that mainstream adoption, right? We need to think out of the box and do really innovative things and new things. So thanks for that. So brings me to my next question. So we're still talking about challenges, and I would like to ask, what are some of the biggest challenges enterprises face when they are partnering with or acquiring startups to get access to new innovations?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal question. I think focus is the biggest challenge. startups are really fun. There's a lot of energy, entrepreneurs. It's like no other part of business. They're giving their all to their company. They believe in it. It's very exciting to work with entrepreneurs. That said, it's a lot of work. And so I think oftentimes, if you don't start with that challenge or a problem we're solving, it becomes a little bit of the startup petting zoo, where a bunch of startups come in and everyone goes, yay, they're exciting. And then nothing really happens, right? There's no connections. There's no commercial deals. There's no scaling up of the partnership. And so I think that's a big challenge, is to really define, what are we trying to solve? How do we know, what benchmarks do we have to show us, hey, like we want to solve this. We're validating this technology that it can help us do this. And if we hit that validation point, now let's scale it, right? Like now let's go big. So I think really creating a framework of thinking about how to work with startups is really important for large organizations. And the best part of working with startups is it's like starting on third base. To give a baseball analogy, the startups have been working on their technology for such a long time, and it's at the bleeding edge. And so in a lot of ways, they're all the way out at the end, at the beginning, right, of whatever the process is. And so a corporation can work with that startup to learn about the technology. And of course, for the startup, it's like such a home run, right? If all of a sudden you're working with Comcast or Coca-Cola, it's just a tremendous jump for your business. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is just really focusing on what you're trying to accomplish, making sure you're measuring that, and then being ready to scale.
Awesome. So as a follow-up question again, how do you think we can overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is, if I were a startup, I would not sell my technology. I would not go to a meeting and say, I do this, I'm using the blockchain for data collection and it's this much faster. That's all interesting. And it needs to be in your pitch deck, but you need to start with, what problem do you solve? Do you solve an important problem for that organization? If startups started thinking that way, right, they all build their decks based on, how do you raise money? And then they kind of change that deck a little bit for sales. I think they should flip their thinking and go, okay, let's get enterprise deals. How do we do that? We have to figure out what problem we solve for, insert, Nike or whoever. And then if you start to tell the story that way, what happens is you change from being a vitamin to a painkiller. And as you know, in the morning, it would be nice if we took vitamins every day. Sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't. But man, if you hurt your knee, you go take Advil or Tylenol, right? Like, because you have a pain and you got to solve that right now. So if you can switch the focus from the vitamins and the, oh, this is cool because of this, and more, hey, I can solve something, you're going to get more attention, more money, and scale a lot faster.
Okay, thanks for that. But I also have a curious question. Do you think founders, especially Web3 founders, they are more focused on raising money than actually doing something more long-term and sustainable?
Yes. So the name VentureFuel came from a meeting before I started the company with a founder. It wasn't even a meeting. It was a dinner. It was a friend. And he told me he had joined an accelerator in San Francisco. They had taken 6% equity. They gave him $100,000, but he had to spend $40,000 of the 100 on their co-working space. And he was telling me this, and I looked at him. I said, what do they give you? And he's like, well, we've got some mentors. And I'm like, who are the mentors? And they were really junior people at a corporation that had nothing to do with his business. And I said, hey man, there's a better way to fuel your venture. You need to go get deals. Like, go work with an enterprise client, because when you go raise money and you can say, I'm working with, Comcast, Nike, whoever, man, all of a sudden those investors are going to look at you in a whole new light. So it's going to increase your valuation, but also you don't need the investors. If you can start to get those enterprise deals, now your business is scaling on its own. So you can take investment as you want to, which puts you in a tremendous point of power. Now, I will all that said, that's a great story. There are certain startups that should focus on raising money. Like if it's a winner-take-all market where there's only going to be one company or two companies that win, like you've got to go out and raise the money. And so I say there's a caveat there, but I would say 90% of startups, 95%, should be starting with proving out, is this a real business? And can this scale? And then go raise the money. And really the money is so you can scale more quickly. That's the intent of venture capital originally.
Oh, wow. Because the stories that have been coming out of the startup world lately has not been particularly interesting and exciting, especially in the Web3 space. And so that's what inspired that question I asked, that I'm more focused on raising money than actually building something more sustainable.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your experience bridging connection. You have a lot of experience bridging connections between corporations, VCs, startups, and angel investors. How important are these connections for enterprises exploring new spaces like Web3?
Yeah, I mean, I think connections make the world go round, right? I was at an event that we were hosting last night in Philadelphia, and I was talking to someone and I said, listen, I get to cheat all the time because when we explore a new technology, I call the top 3 VCs in that space. And I ask them, hey, what are you investing in? Why is this interesting to you? What's the value of this? Help me understand. Should I talk to any founders? And then they'll introduce me to, let's say, the 3 best founders. And then I talk to them. And by the end of those 6 conversations, I know more about that technology than if I took a 6-month class at Harvard Business School, right? Because I'm talking to the people that are investing in it, that have studied it. I'm talking to the founders that have quit their jobs to go on this industry. So I get to get really smart really fast. And so now when a corporation comes to me and says, hey, we're really interested in XYZ, I go, hey, here we go. I know people here that can get me to third base really fast. And that's all community. We've built that up over 9 years, where we have over 700 VCs, angel investors, seed investors around the world that are part of our we call it our global innovation network. And we're able to reach out to them and say, hey, we're exploring blockchain for this purpose. What do you know that's interesting? And that gives us a tremendous competitive advantage in finding interesting startups and also validating those startups because we can talk to who their investors are.
So speaking of community, let's talk about community. We all know that in Web3, community is at the core of most of these Web3 projects. Their success lies on their community growth, who they have in their corner and whatnot. So for startups in Web3, what role should community building and engagement play in their marketing approaches? And how does this differ from major traditional marketing?
Yeah, it's interesting. Depends what part of community we're thinking about here. So there's community like a DAO, right? This idea of decentralization and building something that's kind of core to whatever the product is. That obviously is critically important if that's your business model, and you need to bring partners in. I will say this, just in general, partnership is the way to scale something fast. Doing it all yourself is just like a really slow way to build something. And I think that way for corporations, I think that way for startups. You want to build your community and be able to tap into people that know more than you do about whatever it is. And that can be like, oh, how do I pay my bills? How do I do HR? That can be, how do I get meetings, right? You need to build that network and community. So I think community is one of the most important aspects of scaling anything.
Right. And so why do you think this is different from traditional marketing?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, traditional marketing, depending what you mean by traditional, it all changes so fast. Like if you put an ad on television, right? That's bringing it. What's that?
I said, yeah, TV, radio, billboard.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's all push, right? Like that's push messaging. Hey, look at me. You should buy my thing. I'm great. And really the world doesn't work that way anymore. I mean, it's very effective in some cases, right? And I would recommend, if you are a big company, you certainly invest in advertising. And as you get bigger, right, you start to invest more and more. But the truth of the matter is you want to create pull instead of push. So when you start to the community and you start to create value for other people, I mean, still to this day, most of our business for VentureFuel comes from recommendation from people that have worked with us who go, hey, like so-and-so has a problem, they should talk to you. And so I think of that as community. If you're adding value to people, they start to become ambassadors or salespeople for you. And boy, that's a much more affordable and scaled way to build your business than, spraying and praying, right? Throw up 20 billboards and see what happens I mean, it works. I used to be in the billboard industry. I know it. And I see the value in it, but I think for early stage companies, I'm not sure that's where I would start.
Yes, I agree with you because, I mean, word of mouth referral has really worked magic, especially for early stage projects or early stage Web3 startups that don't really have enough fund and they have to rely on someone telling someone, like in multi-level network marketing. And it has really worked. I mean, people tend to believe what their peers tell them over just having ads shown in their face all the time. So yeah, think it's a really good one when it comes to community building for most Web3 projects. So this next question is for my listeners who are hoping to be Web3 startup founders one day. So Fred, for founders who are looking to launch a Web3 startup, what are some of the biggest pitfalls they should look to avoid?
Yeah, I think the biggest pitfall is focusing too much on the technology. It's obviously critically important. Most people, and you have to know your audience, right? But most people that control the budget for what you want are not technologists, right? So you've got to tell the story about how your technology solves problems. And very few founders do that right out of the gate. Most will just go and talk about how this is that much faster than what was there before and has this much more storage. And here's some benefits and, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, why does this exist? I tell every founder that goes through one of our programs is, why is this a problem? Why are you the one to solve it? And why is now the time to solve it? If you answered those three questions, VCs, corporations, all those people are going to lean forward to your message. If you just talk about how you've created a faster connection or, XYZ has more storage like that, it's just not interesting enough unless it's like 10x better, right? If it's some seismic leap, then boy, you can run with that. But most of the time, it's somewhat incremental or incrementally different. And the biggest thing is you have to recognize the barrier to change. I'll give you a great example. I saw an unbelievable AI startup yesterday. Unbelievable. I was like leaning forward. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to use this company at VentureFuel, even though I was showing it to one of our corporate partners. But they didn't integrate with our CRM. And he's like, oh, that's okay. You can do these things. And he keeps showing me all the amazing things. And all I could think in my head was like, oh, it's going to be so hard for me to switch off my CRM. Even though this is an unbelievable solution, I don't know if I'm going to do it. And it had nothing to do with their amazing product, but everything to do with my unwillingness to change what's working on my side. So I think by really taking time to be like, here's the pain we solve, this is how we solve it, this is how we can help you try it, right? You've got to give them that chance to see if this is magic. And if you can get that part going and you deliver, then it starts to really scale.
Right. You just answered my next question because I was going to ask you that. What advice do you have for building and scaling a successful Web3 startup?
Yeah, I always think about it as like, you want, from a corporate standpoint, right? Like they should do discovery, understand what's out there. Then when you choose you need a trusted advisor to help you choose which startups are interesting. Then you need to validate the technology, and then you need to accelerate what works, right? Like that's the framework I would recommend to a big corporate. So if you reverse engineer that for a startup, You have to be discoverable. People have to find you, so build your community. They're going to want to validate your tech, so make sure it works and give them the opportunity, and then be ready to scale with them, right? Always think about that. We have a lot of startups that come in and say, here's what a pilot would look like, and this is the value. And they don't talk about what the next stage looks like. And that's where it matters to a corporate. Like a pilot of $50,000 or $100,000 or whatever it might be, that doesn't move the needle for a Fortune 500 company, no matter how successful it is. It's when they start to really scale is where they start to see results that matter to them. So you need to paint the picture for what the potential is should this work.
Right. Speaking of opportunities, let's talk about opportunities in Web3. Web3 has loads of untapped opportunities, right? So where do you see the biggest opportunities right now for startups looking to leverage AI technology as it relates to Web3 and blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities here. I think when you think about blockchain in particular, I think a lot of Web3 companies, less and less now, but are always promoting Web3 and always talking about blockchain. And again, it's like you're hyping the technology, not your solution. So I think they need to focus on the solution part. But boy, like I think blockchain is going to become like this back end solution that isn't talked about quite as much as it has been in the past, but makes everything go. I think it is going to be adopted at scale on enterprise levels as, you know, sort of the hiccups are worked out, depending on what industry you're talking about. I think it delivers true benefit, which is the key. So I think there's lots of opportunities. The immediate ones are, you know, contracting is the low-hanging fruit there. I think payments is really interesting in that area. And then if you switch into AI, now it's a whole nother world, depending on which part of AI you're talking. We ran a big accelerator for Comcast around generative AI, just announced our second class with them around enterprise AI. And it was everything from content creation to HR solutions to how do you clean data sets. You know, so there's so many different applications and opportunities here in both of these worlds. So it's I think there's a lot of room to run. I think technology is moving so fast, but you got to make sure that you're solving a real problem we're solving.
Right. So you mentioned something earlier. You spoke about developing a repeatable innovation framework for operations. Can you share what that framework looks like and how it enables real innovation?
Yeah, of course. We've honed this framework over the past 9 years. And it really starts with talking with the corporation, understanding areas that matter to them. Where do they have frustrations? Where do they have pain? What are problems we're solving? And often when we get in there to do that, we have an avalanche of all these things, right, that they want to do faster. It's so many. And then we really need to spend some time figuring out which ones are most important, right? So what ties into their corporate goals. And so once we get there and we say, okay, here's an area or a couple areas we want to go solve, then it's about discovery. Let's go look globally. What are the best startups all around the world solving this problem, right? And so oftentimes we'll have 200 plus qualified startups that actually could solve some part of the problem. From there, we get into vetting. Okay, let's make sure these startups work for this corporation. Let's get it down to a small subset, and then we bring it in front of the client and say, hey, these are the five or 10 that we think can solve this problem in a unique way. Then the next step is let's validate their technology. Let's prove this works. Let's do a pilot or a proof of concept. And we're going to measure that. And we're going to measure it, right? So we're going to say, what does success look like to you as a corporation? If this startup delivers X, is that enough for you to want to do more with them? And do more could be investment. It could be a commercial pilot, a commercial partnership. It could be a joint development agreement. It could be acquisition. It could be a whole bunch of different things. But what we want to do is say, if we validate this technology and it solves some problem, will you want to scale with it? Because that way we're not wasting the founder's time. We're identifying a problem we're solving. And so then we go out, we validate that technology, we prove it out, and then it's about scale, accelerate that partnership. And again, that could look a bunch of different ways, but that's sort of our repeatable framework. Start with a problem, discover the potential solutions, vet them, validate them, and accelerate them.
Okay, thank you. Do you think many startup founders are adopting this framework, or they are just all about raising funds and then raising more money and everything? Because I figured if they adopt this framework, the startup ecosystem will be a much more better place, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the keys is you have to decide as a startup what you're trying to do. It's very flashy to go raise money. I have one of my favorite founders of all time. Every time I check in with him, he's raising money. Every time. And he's raised successful rounds of money for 5 years. But that's all he's doing. And each time, all I can think is like, man, if he spent as much time talking to investors, if he was talking to potential clients, he'd already have all the money. And by the way, he wouldn't have to give up equity to get it. And so I think a lot of founders don't realize that when you go raise money and you do it successfully, that's not really a milestone. Now you have a responsibility to spend that money and scale the company at whatever you promised. So it's pressure to deliver, which is great. And like, it gives you the resources, and for the right company and the right founder, boy, it's amazing. But oftentimes it's better to go learn and test and pivot and get into the weeds with real clients, because they will work with you and they will scale. So I always say you should start with a couple of corporations, get a couple of deals under your belt, really start to learn, get that product market fit, and then go raise money. Again, there's a couple industries where I would not recommend that approach, but for the most part, that's a good way to really scale and scale responsibly.
Okay, nice. So I'm curious, what are these industries that you recommend?
For the VC side? Yeah, I mean, I think if you are trying to create data centers, like, it's an arms race, right? How many physical places can you get to? I think if you are in any industry where it is a winner take all, right? Think Uber, right? Mm-hmm. It's either going to be Uber and Lyft and probably nobody else, right? There's little players everywhere, but like those are the two big hitters. So whoever gets to scale first, and there's big economies of scale once they get big, right? Their tech gets better and smarter. The other thing I would say is generative AI. It is so expensive. There's the need for CPUs. You're using so much computing power that costs a lot of money. In that world, if you're not raising money, you're probably going to fall behind. But I know a founder in generative AI who we brought an opportunity to get an investment from a top tier VC, and she said no. And I was secretly very proud of her when she said no, but I asked why. And she goes, I don't need it. We're making money already with our clients. We're focusing on our time going to get more business. And I thought it was so brilliant. And of course, the VC was like, we'll change the valuation. We'll give more money. And she's like, nah, I don't need it. Now, there are times where you should take it, but I think she was making the right call. So it just depends on your individual situation. But I think it's a more responsible way to grow, unless you're in that winner take all situation or you just need incredible capital, right? If you think about where you need like all sorts of inventory, like there's a lot of capital expenditure you need to be successful. Those are cases where you can either raise money or look for creative financing opportunities.
Wow. Thanks for answering my curious question. I had no idea generative AI is that expensive. And I mean, they seem to be raising money a lot because we have a lot of generative AI startups everywhere, especially on Twitter. Everywhere you look, you're seeing this many AI tools, and they are wondering, okay, what exactly is happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, because so many VCs are backing generative AI companies, they're coming out of everywhere. The question is, what type of generative AI company is it? Is it just a unique idea that sits on top of somebody else's large language model? right? Is it almost like a wrapper where there's not really a unique technology and it's depending on OpenAI or what have you? So it depends. You can actually spin up a really cool generative AI company for not a lot of money and you don't need to raise. But if you're trying to, build your own models and things like that, you need a ton of money.
So still on the AI topic, let's talk about the future. I mean, AI seems to be everywhere lately. The AI seems to be everywhere, like everywhere you look, on social media, in your dreams, beside you, everywhere you are, AI seems to be everywhere. And so what are some emerging technologies or trends you're most excited about when it comes to the future of AI?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. And yeah, the hype cycle is really high for generative AI in particular right now. That said, every 2 years, there's something that captures the press and everyone's imagination, right? So NFTs a couple of years ago, you had the metaverse a couple of years before that. You can go back to websites, right? Like, boy, that was like a fever pitch. Like, oh my gosh, we're going online, right? And I think what's interesting about the web and now generative AI is they both added real value. And so I think their hype is real. I think this is not a trend. I think generative AI is a legitimate leap forward, and is something that will stay around and scale and be something we don't talk about as much, but everyone uses. Every business has some version of it. I love this idea of generative AI being an assistant for everybody, for whatever you're doing, right? So if you're doing sales, you've got a sales bot that's helping you get leads and figuring out when to email somebody. You're designing a deck, and all of a sudden it can auto-generate based on your inputs and get you 70% of the way there. There's a lot of things like that have just really tangible productivity outcomes. I think the content piece gets so much attention because it is cool. Like, it is just like, you can text to video, right? I could write what we're talking about and there could be an avatar of me that looks just like me speaking in my voice, answering your question. That is wildly cool. It's wildly dangerous, right? So there's all sorts of sort of positives and negatives with this. But I think the big thing I would say about AI in general is that it's real. It's here to stay. And I think businesses are going to start looking for true solutions that come out of AI. How does this help me do X better, faster? And the companies that can kind of create these horizontal business cases are going to do really well. Like, there'll be a whole new generation of companies like Salesforce, right? Sort of the cloud computing, what companies came out of that and started to really, grow really fast. There's going to be a wave of companies like that focus on one thing and do it really well. And generative AI is in the background, right? Or AI or machine learning or whatever the tech is. But they're solving a problem in a unique way. That's the secret.
Right. So how do you think they will shape Web3?
How do you think AI will shape Web3?
Yeah.
Very interesting. I think it'll help. I mean, there's so many different things. So we saw an unbelievable startup yesterday that was code creation. So it was creating code basically as like a code assistant. Boy, that would solve a lot of problems. There was a data cleanup AI company, right, that was just taking the data and cleaning it and taking errors out of the approach. There's so many applications like that could help make the expansion of Web3 go faster and remove errors and take out the sort of time it takes engineers and coders to build things. It'll just help them go faster and more affordably, which I think can only lead to more innovation. So I think it's a productivity enhancement.
Right. Cool. So I know we've discussed earlier about how to scale in Web3, especially if you're a Web3 startup founder. So it brings me to my next question. For enterprises new to Web3, what use cases or applications do you think they should focus on first, and why?
Yeah, it really depends on what they're trying to do. I would never go to a corporate and say, you need to do something in Web3. Like, That's what people have been doing, and that's why it's not scaling. Instead, I would go to the corporate and say, what are you trying to accomplish? I'll give you an example. There's a Web3 startup called GivePact, P-A-C-T. And essentially, it's allowing charities to accept cryptocurrency. Now, the technology there doesn't really matter to the biggest charities in the world, right? They don't truly care. They just know that there's a younger consumer that would like to give crypto when they make a charitable donation. And so this opens up a whole new group of people that might make a donation to said charity. It works just like cash as far as they're concerned, right? They don't care about the technology. That's a solving of a problem. You're opening up a new revenue stream. It's seamless for the charity. It gives them something cool to talk about. And it's all being handled in the back end, right? And so they have to prove a whole bunch of things, like, is the money safe? How is it taken care of? Right? All those types of moves, which they have. But that's an example of Web3 solving a real problem and going to market with a solution to that problem that works for almost every charity that's out there.
Okay. So I want to take you back to connections. I know I've asked a similar question before, but I want to ask this again. You connect a lot of players across the corporate innovation, startup, and investment ecosystems. So what do you think that the broader Web3 ecosystem needs to really accelerate growth?
I think the biggest thing is they have to figure out problems they can solve. I think it comes down to, if you think about, if somebody came to your apartment and was like, I have the best paint in the world, and you're not in the market to paint your apartment, that is so uninteresting to you, right? Like, maybe you'll listen and go, oh, that's great. Like, what a cool thing. Great. Maybe when I paint my apartment in 5 years, I'll circle back to this, right? So I think part of this is you don't need a megaphone trumpeting the technology. What you need to do is figure out how your technology solves problems, find people that have those problems, and go solve some of those problems. Because the best way to scale is to have a case study, have 5 case studies. Hey, this is how we helped Nike. Here's how we helped Ford. Here's how we helped so-and-so. Once you have that, man, everything starts to take care of itself. So I think from a community standpoint, changing the idea, I think a lot of times Web3, and we had an intern who was unbelievable. He was one of my favorite interns of all time. And he was very into legal tech and very into Web3 and the opportunity for blockchain in the legal markets. And he was going to all the Web3 conferences and reporting back, and it was really cool. And it was all cryptocurrency and all this stuff. It was a couple of years ago. And I kept saying, hey, you got to figure out what problem this solves. Because otherwise, everyone will listen to how cool it is, but nobody's going to write checks. And so that would be my advice, is find problems that you solve better than anyone else, and then go find people that have those problems.
Right. So I'll also like to ask, do you think that most Web3 founders, they tend to focus on building things that they feel people are already used to? For example, we have majority of Web3 startups that focus on payment. Do you think they are doing that because they feel like, okay, people want to have like a seamless form of transaction in the Web3 space, and they're focusing on other things? Why don't we have like more data analytics and Web3 startups? Why don't we have Web3 fashion startups and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, founders are smart. Founders find gaps. They find opportunities, frustrations, and they build to fill those gaps and opportunities. So certainly payments is an area where people want it to be better, and they're excited by the potential of Web3, and they're willing to pay for it, right? So that, of course, is going to attract more founders to that. But finding unique use cases for this technology is how startups are going to break through, right? My wife always talks about, if you were going to open a bakery, would you open a bakery on a block that had another bakery, or would you open a bakery in the middle of the country where there were no other bakeries, right? And it's an interesting dilemma, because with the first bakery, there are people that are in market buying muffins or bread. And so if you're better than that other bakery, you're going to have customers. Whereas the other one, you're the only game in town. but are people going to come, right? And I think that's the dilemma when you think about a business. Like, are you zigging when everyone is zagging? That can be a lonely place. You're out on an island, you've got something unique. But boy, if you solve a problem and you're on that island, you get to win that market. And so I think that's a pretty interesting, I would recommend, any founder, you follow something that is personal to you. Is it a problem that you want to have solved for your business or for a business you work for? Then you know that there's a market for it. And then if you're not doing the same thing as everyone else, you stand out, and it gives you an opportunity to shine. So I think that's how I would think about it.
All right, awesome. So, what advice do you have for corporate innovators or entrepreneurs looking to leverage AI to drive real business results or startup success in the, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think for corporations, you have to start recognizing that all the best advancements are not going to happen from inside your company. For generations, the way you built big businesses is you had an R&D team that you hired the best people in your industry and you had them go work on problems. And you still should do that, by the way. A lot of our clients are R&D. I can't tell you how impressed I am the more and more R&D people we meet. What's really cool, though, is if you can take that amazing internal R&D team and now have them start collaborating with best-in-class new startups with new technologies that are solving those problems in new ways, man, that's where magic happens. So I think a big part of the corporate side of this is a mindset shift, that this is not going to all happen inside your four doors. You can do it through partnership. You can do it faster through partnership, and you can really scale it. So just switching that mindset is important for corporates to make sure they don't get disrupted, they don't get left behind. And there's a million books and a million classes on sort of this idea of disruption. But really that's the idea of it, is technology is moving really fast. And so you need to unleash the innovators. You need to bring the external innovation and marry it with your internal innovation. For founders, boy, just solve that problem. Find a problem that's worth solving and solve it better than anyone else. If you do that, like the world will be your oyster. Like that's the move. And so it takes time. You're going to pivot a few times. You got to find your market fit, and you have to be ready for that. But to me, like, technology is moving so fast. There's so many new options. I mean, generative AI in particular, like every week I've got a stack of things to read that are just what happened the week before. And so there's going to be a time where you can't keep up with all of it on your own. So you need to be able to look externally and find other people that are doing things, but be open to collaboration, and really focus on what you're passionate about, and just open to new ways to solve those problems.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fred, for an insightful conversation today. It was so great learning so much from you, and I had fun having to ask you these questions and getting insightful answers from you. It was quite innovative, if I can put it like that. And that wraps up today's episode of the Web3 Quick Bite podcast. Big thanks to our guest, Fred. We hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. And if you have any feedback or questions, please reach out on social media or send us an email at webquickquickbites@gmail.com. Thanks again to our guests for joining us, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more exciting content, so be sure to subscribe and tune in. Bye.